Asterisk, for bullies thought they had the upper hand when they cornered a girl on the street. But the moment her two massive military dogs stepped forward, everything changed. The fearless bullies froze in terror, and what happened next will leave you speechless. Asterisk, asterisk, welcome to BrainFuel, the channel that feeds your mind with powerful and emotional stories. Here, every video is designed to inspire you, shock you, and keep you hooked until the very end. Subscribe now and never miss a story that fuels your brain and your heart. Asterisk, stop right there, girl. The words cut through the silence of the evening like a knife. Aaliyah froze, her footsteps echoing softly on cracked pavement as she clutched her school bag tighter. She had been walking home after a tutoring class, the sun long gone, leaving the neighborhood draped in shadows. Streetlights flickered weakly, buzzing faintly, casting uneven pools of light on the road. Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't need to turn around and know who it was. That voice, that sharp, mocking tone, belonged to Monique, the leader of a group of girls from her school who had been tormenting her for months. Aaliyah felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She prayed quietly that maybe she was wrong, maybe they weren't there for her. But when she finally turned her head, her fears became real. 3 figures emerged from the darkness of the alleyway. Monique walked in front, tall, confident, her arms crossed and a cruel smirk plastered on her face. On either side of her were her 2 followers, Shauna and Tasha, both eager to please their leader, both hungry for trouble. They moved slowly, deliberately, blocking the narrow path that Aaliyah had to take to get home. Aaliyah's stomach tightened. She knew what was coming. She had endured their laughter in the hallways, the whispers behind her back. The cruel notes slipped into her locker. She had heard the names they called her, too dark, too quiet, too poor. But tonight, something about their presence felt different. Their eyes glinted with mischief. And they weren't just here to mock her. They wanted more. They wanted to see fear. "Were you going so fast?" Monique asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Don't you want to hang out with us?" The other 2 giggled, the sound echoing eerily in the empty alley. Aaliyah shifted her weight nervously, hugging her school bag to her chest like it was a shield. I need to get home," she whispered, her voice trembling. She tried to step around them, but Shauna shoved her shoulder, pushing her back. "Oh no, sweetheart," Shauna sneered. "Not so fast. We've been waiting for you." Her school bag slipped slightly, and Aaliyah tightened her grip again. She could feel her pulse hammering in her ears, every beat reminding her how trapped she was. Tasha bent down suddenly, snatching the bag. "What's in here?" "Huh? Books? Homework? Let's see how smart you really are." She tugged hard, and Aaliyah stumbled, fighting to hold on. "Stop it." Aaliyah cried, but her voice cracked, and the bullies only laughed louder. The bag ripped open, spilling books, pencils, and papers across the ground. The pages of her notebooks fluttered like frightened birds as they scattered across the pavement. One of her carefully written math assignments landed in a puddle, ink smearing instantly. "Oh, look," Monique said, picking up a paper and holding it to the dim light. "Little Miss Perfect with her perfect homework. Thinks she's better than us." She tore the page into pieces and let them fall like confetti. The others followed suit, ripping and crumpling her work. Aaliyah's eyes burned with tears. Weeks of studying, hours of late-night work, destroyed in seconds. She bent down, desperately trying to collect the torn pages, but Shauna kicked one away with a laugh. "Pick it up, little servant," Shauna mocked. "Crawl for it. That's what you're good at." The sound of their laughter filled the alley, cruel and heartless. Aaliyah's hands shook as she tried to gather what was left. She wanted to scream, to fight back, but her voice felt trapped in her throat. Her father's words echoed faintly in her memory. "Aaliyah, courage doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you face what scares you." But right now, courage felt like something far, far away. Monique leaned closer, her face inches from Aaliyah's. "Tell me, do you ever get tired of being so pathetic? You think anyone cares about you? You think your life means anything?" The words cut deep, sharper than the cold air biting at Aaliyah's skin. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the ground and escape the humiliation. She could feel the tears threatening to spill. But she refused to let them see her cry. Not tonight. Still, she was trapped, 3 against 1. No one else around. And every second that passed, their cruelty grew bolder. Suddenly, Tasha pulled at her braid, yanking her head back roughly. Aaliyah winced, biting her lip to keep from crying out. What? No smart words. No talking back. Tasha hissed. Monique laughed, folding her arms. Look at her, shaking like a leaf. So easy, so weak. I almost feel sorry for her. She paused and smirked. Almost. The girls laughed again, circling her like predators playing with their prey. Aaliyah stood in the middle of the circle, her chest rising and falling quickly, fear and anger colliding inside her. The night grew colder, the shadows deeper, and the flickering streetlight above buzzed louder, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The bullies were closing in, ready to push her past her breaking point. But what they didn't know was that Aaliyah wasn't truly alone. In the silence beyond the alley, in the darkness just out of sight, a pair of sharp eyes were watching. 2 loyal protectors, trained for moments just like this, were already on the move. And in just a few seconds, everything was about to change. Long before that terrifying night in the alley, the story of Aaliyah's courage had quietly begun inside her home. Her father, Sergeant Marcus Johnson, was a man who carried both strength and scars. He had served in the military for nearly 2 decades, traveling to war zones, living through the chaos of battle, and watching good men fall beside him. He rarely spoke about the things he had seen, but Aaliyah often noticed how his eyes sometimes drifted away, lost in memories he couldn't share. What he did talk about, though, were the dogs. Soldiers come and go, he once told her, sitting at the kitchen table with his coffee steaming in his hands. But those dogs never leave your side. They're more than animals. They're family. They'll put their lives on the line for you, without hesitation. At the time, Aaliyah had only nodded, not fully understanding. But everything changed the day her father came home with 2 massive German shepherds, their leashes clutched firmly in his callous hands. Max and Shadow. The first time Aaliyah saw them, her heart jumped. They were huge, tall, muscular, with sharp, alert eyes that seemed to notice everything. Max's coat was lighter, with patches of tan and black, while Shadow was darker, almost all black except for a streak of brown along his chest. They didn't wag their tails or bark when they entered the yard. They stood perfectly still, disciplined, waiting for her father's command. These aren't regular dogs, her father explained. They've been trained in the military. They work with soldiers, search for explosives, and even save lives. But now they're retired. They've earned a home, and that home is with us. At first, Aaliyah was nervous. Their size alone was intimidating. When Shadow walked past her, she could hear the soft thud of his paws on the ground, powerful yet graceful. Max's gaze was so intense it felt like he was studying her, deciding whether or not to trust her. But her father crouched beside her and said softly, "They'll protect you, Aaliyah. They just need to know you're their girl." So she reached out a trembling hand, and to her surprise, Max leaned forward, gently pressing his wet nose against the palm. Shadow followed, nuzzling her arm as if to say, "We're here. We've got you." From that day on, things began to change. Every morning before school, the dogs would walk her to the gate. Their steps were synchronized, their heads high, as if escorting a princess. Neighbors often stared, some in awe, some in fear. "That little girl's got soldiers for pets," one man whispered. And, in a way, he wasn't wrong. Her father began teaching her simple commands. Sit, stay, guard. But the most important one, he said, was protect. "That's the word you use if you're ever in danger," he told her seriously. "They'll know exactly what to do." Aaliyah repeated the commands daily, her young voice firm and steady. At first, it felt strange, almost like playing a game. But as weeks passed, she saw just how intelligent Max and Shadow were. At a single word, they could switch from calm companions to fierce guardians. And slowly, her fear faded. She started talking to them after school, when the loneliness of being bullied weighed too heavily on her chest. She'd sit in the yard, running her fingers through their thick fur, whispering secrets she could never tell anyone else. "They laugh at me," she told them once, her voice breaking. "They say I don't belong. But you don't care, do you?" Max licked her cheek, and Shadow laid his head on her lap, their quiet presence louder than any words of comfort. For the first time in weeks, she felt seen. Her father noticed the change, too. "You stand taller now," he remarked one evening. "Those dogs are teaching you something." "What do you mean?" she asked. "They're showing you what loyalty looks like," he said. "When you know someone's got your back, you walk through the world a little braver." He was right. At school, even when the bullies still whispered, Aaliyah carried herself differently. She wasn't as quick to drop her head or shrink into the background. Somewhere deep inside, she knew Max and Shadow would never let anything happen to her, and the bond only grew stronger. On weekends, her father would take them all to the park. While other kids played on swings, Aaliyah ran drills with the dogs. They would race across open fields, leap over obstacles, and respond instantly to her commands. Strangers stopped to watch, impressed by how such powerful animals listened so closely to a little girl's voice. "Are they really yours?" one woman asked. "Yes," Aaliyah replied proudly. "They're my dogs." That pride carried her through even the hardest days. Still, she never forgot her father's warning. Don't misuse their training. They're not toys. They're protectors. And they'll protect you with everything they have. At the time, those words sounded heavy, like a responsibility she wasn't sure she was ready for. But deep down, she knew he was preparing her for something bigger. And he was right, because the night she found herself cornered in that dark alley, with the bullies circling and her fear growing stronger by the second, those very words would rise in her memory. Her father had given her a gift. Not just two loyal dogs, but the courage that came from knowing she was never alone. What the bullies didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that in the darkness just beyond their sight, Max and Shadow were waiting, watching, ready, and when the moment came, they would show those bullies exactly what loyalty meant. The sound of paper tearing was like thunder in Aaliyah's ears. Every rip of her homework felt like a blow to her chest. Her books, the ones she had worked so hard to keep neat, were scattered across the filthy pavement. Pages fluttered like broken wings, catching the faint glow of the flickering streetlight. She bent down quickly, her small hands scrambling to gather what she could, but Shauna's sneaker came crashing down on one of the notebooks. With a cruel laugh, she twisted her foot, grinding the pages into the dirt. "Oops," Shauna said mockingly. "Guess that one's ruined." Aaliyah's throat tightened. She wanted to scream at them, to tell them to stop, but her voice was trembling, her fear swallowing the words before they could escape. She grabbed at another page, but Tasha snatched it first, crumpling it into a ball and tossing it over her shoulder like it was garbage. Monique stood back with her arms folded, watching with a satisfied grin. "Look at her," she said loudly. "Always so quiet in school, always acting like she's too good for us. What's the matter? Huh? Not so perfect now, are you?" The other two laughed again, the sound sharp and echoing in the narrow alley. Aaliyah tried to stand, holding the few torn papers she had managed to save against her chest. "Please," she whispered, "just give it back. Please." But Monique stepped forward, snatching the bundle of papers out of her hands and tossing them into the air. The wind caught them, scattering them like ash. "You don't get to ask for anything," Monique sneered. "You're nothing, just a little nobody." Aaliyah's eyes burned, but she refused to let the tears fall. She clenched her fists at her sides, trembling. Her father's words echoed in her mind. "Stand tall, even when you're scared." But how could she stand tall against three of them? Suddenly, Tasha reached out and yanked one of Aaliyah's braids, pulling her head back roughly. "Say something now," she hissed. "Say something, or are you too scared?" Aaliyah winced, biting her lip to keep from crying out. She tried to pull away, but Shauna shoved her from the other side, making her stumble. Her school bag lay open on the ground, pencils scattered, a little photograph of her, and her father peeking out from a mess. Monique noticed it, picked it up, and smirked. "Oh, look at this. Daddy's little girl. Cute. Too bad he's not here to save you." She pretended to tear the photo in half, and Aaliyah's heart stopped. "Don't!" she cried out, her voice finally breaking free. For a moment, the bullies froze, surprised at her sudden burst of strength. But then they laughed again, the sound cruel and merciless. "Don't!" Monique mocked, waving the photo just out of reach. "What are you going to do about it?" The air felt colder now, heavier. Aaliyah could feel her chest tightening, every breath harder than the last. She wanted to fight, to grab her things back, to make them stop. But her body felt frozen, her fear like chains around her wrists and ankles. The girls closed in tighter, circling her, their shadows stretching long against the walls. It felt like there was no escape. And then, a sound broke the night, a low, rumbling growl. It was deep, steady, and unmistakable. The kind of sound that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand straight. The bullies froze, their laughter cutting off instantly. Shauna glanced over her shoulder, her smirk faltering. What was that?" she whispered. Another growl answered, this one louder, sharper, closer. Out of the shadows at the far end of the alley, two pairs of glowing eyes appeared. Slowly, deliberately, Max and Shadow stepped forward. Their bodies were tense, muscles rippling beneath their coats, ears pricked forward. Their teeth glinted in the weak streetlight as their growls deepened, vibrating through the night air. The bullies backed up a step. Are those her dogs?" Tasha stammered, her earlier confidence cracking. Monique tried to laugh it off, but her voice shook. "They're just dogs. She probably can't even control them." But when Max bared his teeth and Shadow let out a sharp, warning bark, the sound so loud it echoed against the alley walls, all three bullies jumped back. The false bravado drained from their faces, replaced by wide-eyed fear. Aaliyah's heart was still pounding, but for the first time that night, it wasn't from fear. It was something else, something stronger. She straightened her shoulders, wiping the tears from her eyes. She wasn't alone. Max and Shadow moved forward again, side by side, their paws silent but powerful. They positioned themselves between Aaliyah and the bullies, their bodies forming a barrier. The bullies stumbled backward, their tough act slipping away completely. "Call them off," Shauna shouted, her voice high-pitched. "Tell them to stop." But Aaliyah didn't speak right away. She simply looked at them, the same girls who had tormented her day after day, now trembling in front of her. She could see it in their faces. Pure, raw fear. For once, she wasn't the one afraid. The alley was no longer theirs. It belonged to her. And this was only the beginning. The alley was still, except for the low, steady growls rumbling from Max and Shadow's throats. Their bodies were rigid, every muscle tight, their eyes locked on the bullies. The silence that followed was almost suffocating, broken only by the occasional drip of water from a broken pipe somewhere above. Aaliyah stood in the middle, her chest rising and falling quickly. A few minutes ago, she had been on the verge of breaking, helpless, cornered, drowning in fear. But now she wasn't the same girl. Her dogs were here, her protectors, her soldiers. She could feel their loyalty radiating from them like fire. They weren't afraid of the bullies. They weren't afraid of anything. And with them standing guard, she didn't feel afraid either. The bullies, however, were a different story. Shauna clung to Tasha's arm, her eyes darting nervously between the two dogs. "Monique, do something," she hissed, her voice shaky. Monique tried to stand tall, but her voice betrayed her when she spoke. "They're just dogs," she muttered, her words trembling. She won't. She can't control them. But even as she said it, her eyes widened when Max took a deliberate step forward, lips curling back to reveal sharp, gleaming teeth. Shadow mirrored the movement, his growl deepening into a snarl. The sound made the bullies flinch, their bravado crumbling piece by piece. "Call them off." Tasha finally screamed, her hands shaking. "Make them stop, Aaliyah." Aaliyah's gaze hardened. She remembered every cruel word, every shove, every time they had humiliated her in front of others. She remembered the laughter, the torn books, the whispered insults. And now, for the first time, she held the power. She wasn't going to waste it. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. If you're ever in danger, you give the command. They'll know what to do. They'll protect you with everything they've got. The single word sat on her tongue, heavy and powerful. She hesitated for a moment, not because she doubted the dogs, but because she realized how much things were about to change. She lifted her chin, her voice steady, calm, and certain. Protect. The effect was immediate. Max and Shadow sprang into action, their discipline training kicking in. They didn't attack recklessly. They moved with purpose. Max lunged forward, stopping just inches from Monique, his bark so fierce it echoed off the alley walls like thunder. Shadow darted to the other side, circling Shauna and Tasha, his body low and powerful, forcing them backward. The bullies shrieked, stumbling into one another in panic. Their earlier cruelty had vanished, replaced by sheer terror. Monique's tough mask shattered. She tripped over her own feet, landing hard on the pavement as Max stood over her, his teeth bared, his bark relentless. Tears welled in her eyes as she scrambled backward on her hands, begging, "Please, please, don't let them hurt me." Shauna clutched Tasha's arm, both of them pressed against the alley wall as Shadow prowled before them, growling low, his eyes glowing like fire. Every time they tried to move, he shifted closer, snapping his jaws just enough to send them screaming. "Make them stop." Tasha cried again, her voice breaking. "Please, Aaliyah, we're sorry. We didn't mean it." Aaliyah stood straighter, her fear long gone. For once, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel weak. She felt powerful. Not because she wanted revenge, but because she finally understood something. She was never truly alone. "You think it's funny to hurt people?" Aaliyah's voice was calm but firm, cutting through their screams. "You think it makes you strong to make others feel small?" The bullies were silent except for their whimpers, their eyes darting nervously to the dogs, who stood ready to strike if needed. "Now you know how it feels," Aaliyah said softly. "Now you know what fear is." Her words hit harder than any punch could have. Monique's lip trembled as she nodded frantically. "We will stop. I promise. Just call them back." Aaliyah looked at them for a long moment. She wanted to hate them. She wanted to make them feel every ounce of the pain they had given her. But instead, she remembered something her father had always told her. Real strength isn't about revenge. It's about knowing you don't need it. She took a deep breath and gave another command. "Stand down." Instantly, Max and Shadow stopped barking. Their snarls faded, their bodies loosening slightly as they stepped back, returning to Aaliyah's side. They stood tall and proud, their eyes still sharp, making sure the bullies didn't try anything foolish. The silence that followed was deafening. The three girls, once so bold and cruel, were now pale and shaking, pressed against the wall like frightened children. Their eyes darted between Aaliyah and the dogs, terrified that at any moment things could change again. Without another word, Aaliyah bent down, gathered what little remained of her schoolwork, and slipped a photograph of her and her father back into her bag. Then she turned and walked away, Max and Shadow flanking her on either side like loyal soldiers. Behind her, the bullies didn't move. They didn't dare. For the first time, Aaliyah walked with her head held high, her step steady, her heart strong. She had given the command, and everything had changed. The night air was cooler as Aaliyah stepped out of the alley. The city seemed quieter, calmer, as if the chaos she had just endured was sealed behind her. Her footsteps echoed on the pavement, but this time they weren't shaky. She walked tall, her school bag resting firmly on her shoulder. On either side of her, Max and Shadow padded silently, their presence commanding, their heads held high. She glanced down at them, and for the first time in her life, she truly understood what her father meant when he called them family. They weren't just dogs. They were her protectors, her friends, her shield against the darkness of the world. By the time she reached home, her father was waiting on the porch. He always waited when she came back from tutoring, a habit he never broke. He stood there with his arms crossed, the porch light glowing behind him, making his figure look even more solid and strong. The moment his eyes landed on her, though, he noticed something. Something had shifted. His daughter wasn't the same timid girl who had left the house hours ago. She walked up the steps, Max and Shadow sitting loyally at her heels. Her father raised an eyebrow. Something happened. Aaliyah hesitated. Part of her wanted to bury the whole thing, pretend it never happened. But the truth was too heavy, too important. So she nodded. The girls, they tried to hurt me again. Instantly, his expression hardened. His jaw clenched, his fists tightening at his sides. Where? He demanded. In the alley, Aaliyah whispered. But I wasn't alone. She turned and gestured to Max and Shadow, who sat watching silently, their eyes alert even now. Her father's sternness softened. He knelt down and scratched behind Max's ears, then ran a hand down Shadow's back. Good boys, he murmured. You did your job. But then he stood and looked at Aaliyah. And what about you? What did you do? She swallowed, replaying the moment in her mind. The way she had stood tall, the way her voice hadn't shaken when she gave the command. I told them to protect me, she admitted quietly. And they did. The girls, they ran. They were terrified. Her father studied her for a long moment. Then, instead of anger, a small smile spread across his face. He placed his hands on her shoulders. I'm proud of you. Aaliyah blinked in surprise. Proud? But I was scared. I almost cried. Of course you were scared, he said gently. That's what makes it courage. If you weren't scared, it wouldn't count. Courage isn't about having no fear, Aaliyah. It's about facing it anyway. And you did that tonight. Her chest swelled with warmth. She had expected him to scold her, to tell her she should have run or called for help. But instead, he was telling her that what she did was brave. And deep down, she knew he was right. The next morning at school, whispers filled the hallways. News of what had happened spread like wildfire. Some said Aaliyah had unleashed wild beasts on Monique and her friends. Others swore she had trained killer dogs that would tear anyone apart with a single word. The truth, of course, was simpler, but the effect was undeniable. Monique, Shauna, and Tasha avoided her completely. When they passed her in the hallway, their eyes dropped to the floor. The mocking smiles were gone, replaced by tight lips and nervous glances. They didn't say a word. Aaliyah walked with her head higher than ever before, not because she wanted to intimidate anyone, but because she finally knew her worth. Days passed, then weeks. Slowly, something surprising happened. One afternoon, as Aaliyah was packing her books, Monique approached her, not with her usual arrogance, but with hesitation. Monique's voice cracked. I wanted to say sorry. Aaliyah looked up, startled. She searched Monique's face for sarcasm, but there was none. Her eyes were downcast, her shoulders slumped. She was sincere. Shauna and Tasha stood a few feet behind, awkward and silent. Aaliyah could have laughed. She could have told them it was too late. But instead, she simply said, Don't hurt anyone again. Monique nodded quickly. We won't. And then they walked away. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. And for Aaliyah, that was enough. At home that evening, she told her father about the apology. He listened quietly, then smiled knowingly. Sometimes people only learn through fear, he said. But fear alone won't change them. Respect will. And you earn theirs. That night, Aaliyah sat on her bed, Max lying at her feet, Shadow curled near her head like a watchful guardian. She ran her fingers through their fur, her heart finally at peace. You changed everything, she whispered to them. You made me brave. The dogs didn't respond with words, of course. But Max gave a gentle wag of his tail, and Shadow lifted his head to rest it on her lap. That was enough. Lying there in the soft glow of her bedside lamp, Aaliyah realized something powerful. Strength doesn't always mean fighting back. Sometimes it means standing tall. Sometimes it means having loyalty at your side. And sometimes it means knowing you're worthy of protection, worthy of love. From that day on, she carried that lesson with her everywhere. Whenever she faced a challenge, whenever doubt whispered in her mind, she remembered the night in the alley, the night she gave the command, the night she discovered her voice, the night her loyal dogs showed the bullies what true power looked like. And she knew one thing for certain. She would never walk alone again.